We have 10 minutes before the official class stuff starts, and I like to talk about news on such occasions. This one was interesting, a vulnerability. I've seen this many times. The New York City subway has a website, and they will let you type in your credit card number, and it'll show you all the charges for the last week. So you can see where people went and when they went there, and you can do it for anybody as long as you know their credit card number. And this, of course, is a serious privacy risk. This is what they're Eva Galperin is one of the lawyers from the EFF, and she's a big privacy advocate, and she was pointing out this is a terrible thing. She's quoted in here because there are a lot of people who live with an abuser, and that abuser can find their credit card number, and then they want to stalk them because they're jealous and want to see what they're doing. And you know, this is really garbage. They should make you log into some kind of account with a password before revealing secrets. And when they notified the company, they just lied and said nothing's wrong and they're not going to do anything. It's the usual sort of thing. So it's a thing to be aware of. I see this kind of problem a lot.
That's scary.
What's that?
That's scary.
Scary, yeah, that's true. That's the thing. Once people have your data, they very often do something stupid with it. They put it somewhere insecure and let it get stolen, or they just hand it out foolishly without thinking about the consequences. So this is pretty interesting. There's a thing called serverless computing now. And of course, nothing is truly serverless, but what they mean is instead of you renting like a virtual machine that has an operating system and installing an app, you just want one app to run on the web, and they will put it, there's this thing called Firecracker in Amazon, and what it does is it's a really lightweight virtualization platform. You design special virtual machines just to run in this thing, and it doesn't simulate much hardware the way other virtual machines do. Instead of simulating a PCI bus and power and a graphics card and all that, it just has this thing called VirtIO drivers that talk directly to the host hardware. And so you can make a very small, very efficient virtual machine that will run really fast. And they were able to clean up FreeBSD so it can boot in 25 milliseconds. So the reason they call it serverless is when you get a request, it will just boot up the service, answer your request, and then delete the virtual machine. So it doesn't waste any power on the server, so it's much cheaper. And that's the idea. This is what they call serverless. You get a service, but you don't have a running server all the time. It just spins up the server when you need it. And that's a cute idea. Now this one, I was glad to get to the end of this. Barracuda makes hardware for enterprises. They're one of the big providers, and they made an email gateway. And in last year, I think in October or so, Chinese hackers hacked those gateways. They found a vulnerability, and they used it to put malware on the gateways. And Barracuda put out a patch, and they put out a script to remove the bad guys from your network, and then they discovered that that didn't work. They were still in there. So then they told all their customers that they had to buy new hardware. And this was several months ago, and I'm like, I've never even heard of anybody telling you have to buy new hardware. How can it not be possible to wipe it clean? And then they found that even the new hardware was still owned. So, and they explained how they did it. These Chinese hackers were not messing around. They infected the machines, they found a vulnerability, then they infected the backups, then they infected the configuration files. So when you would buy new hardware, you would export the configuration of the old one, put it on the new one, and it would bring in the malware. So this totally fooled them, and it took them a long time, months to figure it out. So it's interesting, a severe attack by really intelligent attackers that anticipated your cleanup responses and were a jump ahead of you. And this reminds me of the Chinese hackers that attacked Google in 2010. They put malware on the Google servers, and they put hidden malware that would sleep for a month or 3 months or 3 years and then wake up. So you would think it was clean, and then years later it wakes up and you're owned again. That's right. When the advanced persistent threats want to get in, they are sometimes very good, very professional, real military. They own you, you're really owned. You know, they're not amateurs. So this is a thing that I've seen articles about frequently, a thing to know about. The people that are committing cybercrime are often human trafficking victims, basically slaves. The people calling you on the phone trying to get you to give them money and stuff, they're often just victims themselves. They get told there's a tech job for you, like programming or something, and when they show up, they take away their passport and tell them you have to call people and tell them these lies to get money from them, and that's what they're forced to do. A thing to be aware of. why it makes it really hard to determine how to punish people for crimes, because they're often victims more than perpetrators. So here's one. In the United Kingdom, 2,000 flights were canceled, and they said it's because an unusual piece of data came in and crashed the server, which is pretty amazing. I mean, what one person on Mastodon said, probably someone used a comma to separate a money amount instead of a period, and it couldn't handle that. And this is really sleazy software. I mean, you should be able to handle a format error like that. You shouldn't be able to send data that will just crash the server and cause all the flights to get canceled and everything, but that's what happened. So obviously they need to improve their systems. The same thing's true of a lot of critical infrastructure here. A lot of infrastructure here is running on old hardware, old software. A lot of government agencies are running on incredibly out-of-date stuff, like the IRS is running on COBOL and things like that, and you know, that makes them vulnerable to simple attacks like this. So here's a way to foil car thieves. This is a cute idea. I saw an article about it before. This one goes into more detail. There's a cigarette lighter in your car, which is really an auxiliary access to the power supply of the car. And what you do is you connect this little device here with a keypad to the cigarette lighter. And you have to press these buttons, and it sends jolts of power to the battery. And that pattern unlocks the car so it will start. So you don't have to modify anything. The point is, modern cars are much more vulnerable to theft because they have all these smart lock opening features, and you can trick them with radio signals, and you can connect to the CAN bus and connect to the computer system in the car. And this is a way to add a layer of security that prevents all that. I've heard of people used to do this. They've just put a special switch under the dash where you just have to know to click the switch to start the car. And this is a slight upgrade on that. But the point is, it gives you another layer of security that does not depend on the internal computer and all that jazz. So it might be a good idea. This product is very interesting. I would like to write a project using it. I'm using, I did check and I found out this will work in Google Colab, using Google Colab in the machine learning class. And anyway, scaling, I didn't know this. Python runs incredibly slowly. I thought it ran pretty fast, but they say it can run 60,000 times slower than other languages. And this product fixes it. It will analyze your Python code, figure out why it's running slowly, and then connect to large language models and rewrite it for you and say, change it to this to make it run fast. So that sounds very interesting, and I'd like to get it going and see how well it works. Yeah, I'd like to see how well it accomplishes that job. And this one is EFF. The EFF is the privacy advocates for the internet, and they also advocate for a lot of other good behavior on the internet. They're very much like the ACLU for the internet. And here they are taking a position which is very much like the one the ACLU took years ago. When I was a child, the Nazis marched in Chicago, and the ACLU went out and said, you have to let them march because we don't suppress free speech in America, and they were considered very unpopular for that, but they believed in sort of an absolute interpretation of free speech. And here's the EFF doing something very similar. An internet service provider called Hurricane Electric, which is around here, they're in Fremont, they blocked access to a website to get it off the internet. It's Kiwi Farms. Kiwi Farms is a notorious hate site. They target people, they post terrible things about people like their home address, they send mobs to harass people. They're really, really rotten people, and everybody hates them. And Hurricane Electric decided to kick them off the internet by not delivering their packets from their server. And high-level internet service providers can do that. They can censor the internet, but the EFF says they shouldn't. You don't want to get in this game. And what they say, there's several objections. One is just it's not the right place to censor something. I've often had this argument before. You should take things down at the source. The hosting provider should be notified this is illegal content, you have to take it down. That's the logical place to take something down. But anyway, the other thing they point out is once you have done this, now you have announced that you're willing to do this and you have the technical capability to do this. Now you're going to get flooded with protests from, say, pro-life people that say you have to take down the sites that will help you get an abortion. All kinds of political people are going to be demanding you take stuff down. Once you start doing this, where does it stop? And you probably won't be glad that you decided to start censoring the internet. That's why I've always defended companies like Cloudflare that won't do this. Cloudflare will keep your site up no matter what it is. Even if it's something awful, they will just protect it from attacks. And a bunch of people said they should be taking down this site and that site and that site. And I said, man, if I was running the company, I would not do that. I would not pay my employees to try to censor the internet because I know it's going nowhere. But there's a lot of arguments about this on both sides. Yeah.
But it's not that simple. You can't just block people on the internet. Like,
Well, if you're a high-level service provider, you can. You can be their connection to the internet from their server.
for example,
Yeah.
uTorrent. You know what that is, right?
Mutual?
uTorrent.
uTorrent, right. Oh, if you, that's right. And so what they did is they put one behind Tor.
Pirate Bay.
Yeah, that's right. They put one on behind Tor, and that one is still up.
And they got blocked. And then they just made it.
They can't block that one, but they blocked the other one that's on the public internet.
They could just keep making new servers.
They can, and that one, if you take it down at the source, they have to move to bulletproof hosting. That's what happened before. Like if really evil sites, you can complain to the hosting provider and they will take them down. And there are more expensive hosting providers in like Russia that will just host anything, kiddie porn, malware, anything. They don't care because they're outside American law, but they're more expensive. And those are harder to take down, but that's what happens. You drive them somewhere. You can't take them completely off the internet, but you can make it more difficult for them to stay on the internet. And then they'll have to work harder to get back on. Anyway, it's an interesting issue, and the EFF is an important organization, and it's interesting to see their point of view. I saw people arguing the other side, saying, no, it's a bad site, you should take it down. And that's sort of the end justifies the means kind of argument. Anyway, so let me stop this one.